Hey y'all, we are sewing up a Maeve pattern today. The first step is going to be taking your front and back bodice pieces and putting them right sides together. And we're going to sew them along the top to create the shoulder seams using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. If your fabric is a little bit lightweight or doesn't have great recovery, like a super light sweater knit, you can add some clear elastic to the seam to help stabilize it. Next, you're going to keep your pieces right sides together and we're going to sew the side seams. So from under the arm to the hem on both sides, sew them together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance again. Once your side seams are sewn, we're going to take our neckband piece and you're going to fold it right sides together and you're going to stitch the short ends together again with a 1/2 inch seam allowance and then press that seam open and fold it on itself again to enclose that seam, and you're going to quarter the neckband. So find the front center and then match the center front and center back to find the other two quarter points. We're going to also quarter our neckline. So again, match the shoulder seams to find the center, front, and back. And then go ahead and match the center, front, and back to find the other two quarter points. Then we are going to put the right sides of the neckband to the neckline and you are going to pin them together, matching the quarter points, and you will gently stretch the neckband to fit the neckline and you're going to sew them together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Once you have it sewn on, you can give it a nice press, and if you want to, you can top stitch along the neckline. Then go ahead and set your bodice aside for a moment while we work on our sleeves. You are going to fold your sleeve in half with the right sides together and you're going to stitch them from the top to the bottom to create the side seam, again using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and you will do the same thing with the other sleeve piece. Then it's time to stitch your sleeve to your bodice. So the bodice is wrong side out and the sleeve is right side out. And I'm going to place a pin at the top and you're going to stick the sleeve inside of the bodice so they are right sides together, matching that center point and then matching the side seams and then easing the rest of the sleeve in place. And it should match up perfectly just like that. And then we're going to sew the sleeve to the bodice with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And you're going to do the same thing on the other side with the other sleeve. Now you will take your cuff piece. If you're doing the hemmed version, then we'll show that in just a little bit. You're going to fold your cuff piece in half, right sides together, and you're going to stitch them together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Then you can press that seam open and fold the cuff down on itself and do the same thing with the other cuff. Then you're going to take your sleeve piece and we're going to run 2 gathering stitches along the edge, one at a 1/4 inch from the edge and one at 5/8 of an inch from the edge. Next, you will find the center of your cuff and you are going to match the center to one seam and then the seam of the cuff to the other seam on the sleeve. And you will pin them together. And once you have them pinned together, you're going to pull the gathering stitches so that the edge of the sleeve matches the width of the cuff. So just gather it to match and pin it in place. And once you have it all matched, you will stitch the sleeve to the cuff with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Once you have it all stitched together, you can give it a nice press, and then you will want to go ahead and remove those gathering stitches from the edge of the sleeve. And you're are going to repeat that entire process, gathering the sleeve and sewing the cuff on with the other sleeve and cuff piece. If you did a hemmed sleeve version, then you will press the hem of the sleeve up a 1/2 inch toward the wrong side and edge stitch it in place. Next, you're going to take your bodice piece, and on the bottom waist seam, you are going to run 2 gathering stitches, again, one at 1/4 inch from the edge and one at 5/8 of an inch at the edge. If you're doing a hemmed separate top version, you will skip this step and just hem the bottom of your top with a 1/2 inch hem allowance. If you're doing the banded crop or top like this one, then you will take your band piece and fold it right sides together and stitch those short ends together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then fold it on itself and find the quarter points of the hemband and also the quarter points of the bottom waistline of your crop or top. And with the right sides together, we are going to match the quarter points of the hemband to the quarter points of your bodice. And once you have it all pinned, you will pull those gathering stitches and match the width of the waistline to that hemband. So you're just gathering it until the waistline is the same width. If you're doing the dress version, then you would be doing the same thing a little bit later after you sew your skirt pieces. And you would attach it to your skirt instead of the hemband. Once you have this all gathered and matching, then you will use a 1/2 inch seam allowance to stitch them together, and then you will press the band down and you will remove the gathering stitches. Then your separate top is all complete and we can start to work on our skirt. So you're going to take your skirt pieces and put them right sides together, the front and back. If you're doing the slit option, then make sure you have marked where the top of your slit on your pattern piece of the front skirt, and you just use a pin or a clip or some kind of marking or small snip to mark that. And you're going to be sewing the skirt pieces together from that slit marking all the way to the waist seam with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. If you are not adding the slits, then you would just sew them all the way down on the sides together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Once you have these sewn together, you are going to press the unsewn raw edges that are below your slit marking back toward the wrong side with a 1/2 inch back, and then you will edge stitch in place to hem the slit opening. You will do the same thing on the other side with the other slit if you're doing 2, and then you will press the bottom hem up 1/2 inch toward the wrong side and edge stitch in place to hem the bottom of your skirt. Set that aside a moment and we will finish the top of the elastic. Quickly, we're going to show you how you attach the bodice to the dress option. So again, it's the same step where you are running 2 gathering stitches on the bottom waist of your bodice, and you are going to match it to the waistline of your skirt, and you are going to attach the bodice to the skirt with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then you will press the bodice up and the skirt down and just remove those gathering stitches from your bodice. And then you will just hem the bottom of your skirt and your dress would be complete. To finish your separate skirt, you are going to take your elastic and you are going to overlap the ends and you are going to stitch them together. You will overlap them by 1/2 inch, and just using a zigzag or your favorite stretch stitch, go over it a few times to hold the elastic in place, and you have a loop. Then you're going to want to take your elastic and you're going to quarter the elastic, and you're also going to quarter your waistline. So match the side seams to find the center, front, and back, then match the center, front, and back to find the other quarter points, and then find the quarter points on the elastic. And you are going to take the elastic and you're going to put it on the wrong side of the skirt, and you're going to match the quarter points and the raw edges of the elastic to the top of your skirt, and you will gently stretch your elastic to fit the waist opening. And you are going to stitch the elastic to the skirt with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. If you use your serger, you are going to want to turn off your serger blade so you don't accidentally cut the elastic. Then you are going to fold the elastic over toward the wrong side on itself, so you want it nice and tight. You want the skirt to be folded directly over the elastic and nothing sticking on top. And then you are going to stitch the elastic on that bottom edge with your favorite stretch stitch to hold it in place. And then your skirt is complete. If you have any questions about sewing up the Maeve, then you can ask them down below. As always, we love to see them sewn up and posted in our Facebook group or on Instagram at Made for Mermaids, #Maeve Pattern, #Made for Mermaids Patterns.